3 years ago, a father believed his twin daughters were gone forever. But one day, on a dusty bus rolling through the heart of the Wild West, he found them singing, alive, unaware of the storm about to break his world. What he didn't know yet was that this reunion would shatter not just his heart, but his entire life before it even truly began. Where are you watching this video from? Let us know down in the comments below. And if you've enjoyed these stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more. Now, sit back and dive into the journey, because this is one tale you won't forget. The sand had teeth. It bit at my boots with every step, scoured the leather, lodged between the laces. Wind had been blowing since morning, hard and restless, carrying grit across the open plain like tiny shards of bone. The sun was out, yes, but the sky was pale behind the dust. Everything looked faded. Even the rocks felt like ghosts of what they'd once been. I didn't remember turning off the main trail. Didn't plan it. One moment I was following the canyon edge south. The next, I was staring at two fence posts leaning like drunkards into the wind. No sign between them, no gate, just a thin trail scratched into the earth like a scar someone forgot to heal. And I followed it. That's how it's always gone for me. Never chased anything in particular, never stayed long enough to put down a name. Just moved with the land, like the wind itself was dragging me along by the collar. Some men look for meaning. I learned young not to bother. You either found it by accident, or not at all. The mare's hooves crunched over brittle stone. She was tired, same as me, but stubborn. I let her pick the pace. Her coat was dust-caked and sweaty, her flanks shivering against the grit. We hadn't passed a well in 2 days, and the last creek we found was nothing but mud and flies. I hadn't spoken a word in 3 days. Didn't feel the need, not even to the horse. I kept my voice tucked away. Same place I kept the memories. Then I heard it. Soft, almost like a trick of the wind. I stopped breathing just to hear it better. A sound like, not a scream, no, not even a cry exactly. More like the wind had slipped into something hollow. A hitch, a whimper, something too human to ignore. I slid from the saddle slow. Canteen bumped against my hip. Rifle on my back creaked in its strap. The mare snorted once, then stilled. The sound came again. I stepped forward through dead sage and slats of fence that had long since given up trying to stand. My boots stirred ash. The ground was scattered with char. Someone had burned something here. A post, a wagon, maybe hope. And then I saw her. She was tied upright to a broken post, arms behind her, hair covering most of her face, but the blood was clear even beneath the dirt. Dried, cracked. Her dress was torn, rope bruises on her wrists. One side of her face was purple, swelling already. She didn't move, didn't even blink, but her eyes were open, glassy, staring into nothing like she'd been dead for days but hadn't been told. At her feet lay a bundle. No, two. Wrapped in an old horse blanket, stained and rough, were 2 infants. Newborns. Couldn't have been more than a day old. One of them twitched, made a weak sound like breath, trying to remember how to become a voice. The other was too still. I crouched, didn't speak, didn't even think. My hands moved. I unstrapped the knife from my belt, cut the ropes binding her wrists. They fell like snapped twine. She swayed once, then collapsed into my arms like she'd just remembered gravity. She was light. Too light. Bones and silence. I looked up the hill behind her. There was a house, or what used to be. A homestead that had lost its fight with time, roof half collapsed, chimney leaning, smoke still barely whispering from its mouth like someone hadn't left that long ago. But there was no one now. Only her, and the twins, and the wind. I lifted the babies first. Their skin was soft but too pale. I wrapped them tighter in my saddle blanket, made a sling, crossed it over my chest. Then I gathered her, arms beneath her knees and back, her head lolled against my collarbone. "You're coming with me," I thought. Maybe I said it. Maybe I didn't. Didn't matter. I walked back to the mare. Tied the twins close, settled her behind the saddle, leaned her against me. The ride back was slow. I led the mare on foot. Snow began to fall again, wide. Lazy flakes that got caught in my lashes melted down my neck. The trail narrowed, curved along an old creek bed I knew would lead to the hills. By dusk, we reached the cabin. Not much. One room. A stove. A cot. Roof that held when it had to. Firewood already stacked. I'd been there a week, maybe 2. Hadn't meant to stay that long. Just wanted to fix the stirrup on the saddle and wait out the cold snap. Funny how plans bend when you're not looking. I kicked open the door. Heat hit my face like a memory. The babies whimpered louder now. I unwrapped them slow, checked their limbs. Nothing broken, no marks I could see. One was hungry, rooting with her mouth open, tiny fists flailing. The other just blinked, eyes like wet coal. I laid the woman on my cot, checked her side. Bruised, mostly. Some cuts, one ankle swollen. Her skin was dry as paper. I covered her with the quilt, then stirred the fire higher. Found the last of the goat's milk I'd been saving, mixed it with warm rainwater, poured it into 2 small jars. They drank like they hadn't ever before. Greedy, desperate, alive. When they finally slept, I sat beside the fire, watched her chest rise and fall. Not steady, but moving. That was enough. He didn't sleep. Didn't even take off my coat. I sat there in the flicker of pine flame, waiting for something. Her name, maybe. Or a sign. Or the weight of it all to hit me. It didn't come all at once. Just a thought, small and sharp. Someone left her there to die. Someone tied her up, bruised her, left her, and 2 freshborns in the middle of the desert like garbage. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. That came later. What I felt was wrongness. Like the world had tilted, and only I noticed. When dawn broke, I was still sitting. She stirred once, groaned, turned toward the cradle I'd made from a crate and a pile of shirts. Her eyes opened. She saw the girls, then me. Her lips cracked. You didn't leave. Not a question. Just a fact. I nodded. She tried to rise. Failed. Her voice broke again. They said I wasn't worth feeding. I didn't answer. Didn't have to. I dipped a cloth in warm water, handed it to her. She pressed it to her face. Her hands trembled. Not from fear. From the cold leaving her. You're not afraid, she whispered later, as the babies stirred again. Taking in someone like me. I didn't look at her when I answered. You're safe. That was all. I meant it like a promise. And I kept it. Every hour that followed. Every log I added to the fire. Every time I stepped outside so she could nurse or clean without eyes on her. I never asked what happened. Never asked her name until she was ready to give it. She didn't cry. Not then. But her eyes softened. Like someone who'd forgotten how to hope was remembering how it felt. The first morning after, I chopped wood slower than usual. Not out of tiredness, though the lack of sleep clawed at my spine like a dull blade. But because the sound of the axe echoed differently now. It wasn't just splitting pine for one man's supper. There were other breaths inside that cabin now. Tiny ones, shallow, struggling sometimes. And one breath that came in rattled fits. Like the lungs it filled were remembering what it meant to stay. I didn't look inside after the first hour, just kept working. The cold bit at my fingers, and the sweat froze quick on my collar. But my mind kept wandering to the weight I'd carried in last night. Not the physical weight. She'd been light as windfall. No, the weight of her silence. The weight of what someone else had done to her. It settled deep in my bones. The babies cried once mid-morning. Not loud, just enough to pull me back toward the door like a rope had wrapped around my chest and given a tug. I didn't rush. Just opened the door slow and stepped inside. She was sitting up, barely, one elbow propped behind her on the cot. Her hair clung to her face in damp ropes, her cheeks still hollow, but her eyes weren't empty anymore. They flicked to me, then to the babies, then back again. I nodded once. No words. None needed. She reached for one of them. Her hands were shaking. I brought her water. helped her hold the tin cup steady. She drank like someone afraid it would vanish between sips. I didn't watch her face, gave her space. The kind that meant more than comfort, it meant choice. Some folks don't realize how much freedom lives in silence. By midday, I had the fire fed high, the pot filled with thin broth, and the cabin warm enough to sweat in. The snow outside had slowed, falling in flakes big enough to count if you had the patience. I sat in the corner, cleaning my rifle in long, careful motions. She rested, eyes half-lidded. One baby curled at her chest. The other slept beside her in a nest of quilts and shirts. There was no talk, but something had shifted. The air didn't feel like it was holding its breath anymore. I stepped outside before sunset. Needed air that wasn't full of heat and healing. My boots sank into soft drifts. Smoke rose from the chimney in steady curls. I checked the traps near the edge of the ridge, caught a rabbit. Good size, enough for a small stew. I cleaned it fast. Hands practiced, heart somewhere else entirely. When I returned, she was asleep again. The girls too. I set the pot over the fire, let the smell of slow cooking fill the walls. There was something holy in that. Not the meal itself, but the making of it. The way it filled the cabin with something besides fear. That night I slept sitting up. Did mental. But I couldn't stretch out while they were still weak. Not yet. Not while the world was still figuring out whether it wanted them alive. She stirred once, reached for the water beside her, drank, held the baby close. I watched without speaking. The fire cracked. The wind howled past the shutters like it had somewhere to be. He didn't move. I just listened. To the breathing, to the rhythm of survival. It took 3 days before she could stand. 4 before she walked to the stove herself. I'd wake early and find her upright. Blankets wrapped tight, boiling water with stiff fingers. She never said a word, just gave me a look that said she knew I'd let her, that I wouldn't stop her from trying. That seemed to matter more than anything. She wore one of my old shirts. Sleeves rolled past the elbows. Her own clothes hung like regret, torn, blood-stained. Impossible to patch. She didn't ask for more. I left a flannel out for her one morning, and she took it without comment. Wore it every day after that. Tied a strip of my bandana in her hair to keep it back. She didn't look like a ghost anymore. Still pale, still slow. But there was a pulse to her now. The girls fussed more. Their lungs grew stronger. I'd wake to the sound of them wailing and find her already up, rocking them with motions that were shaky but sure. She moved like someone remembering muscle memories she never meant to need. And me, I just stayed out of the way. Not out of indifference, but because I knew what it meant to be looked at too long. To be watched like you might break. Some things heal best in the space between. She started folding things. That's how I knew. Napkins. Shirts, pieces of cloth I hadn't touched in weeks. She folded them with precise hands, slow and neat, like the world might right itself if the corners lined up. I didn't question it. Everyone's got their own way of building a fortress. Mine was chopping wood. Hers was folding things small enough to hold. I built a small cradle one morning out of the leftover pine. Not much. Just 4 planks and a few nails lined with the softest cloth I had. I left it by the stove, didn't mention it, just set it down and went back outside. When I came back in, she had placed both babies inside. Her fingers rested on the edge, like she was holding on to something real for the first time in years. That evening, we sat on opposite ends of the room. I was sewing a tear in my boot. She was rocking gently in the chair, the girls asleep in the cradle beside her. The firelight played across her face in quiet strokes. She looked older somehow, not worn, just real, like a person who'd crawled through something no one should and come out the other side with pieces still intact. I caught her watching me once. Not long, just a flicker. Then she looked away, but something passed between us. Not words, not even trust. Recognition. Like 2 trees that had been struck by lightning in different storms, now growing in the same soil. The snow began to melt by the 5th day, only in patches, just enough to show the ground still existed underneath all that silence. I watched her from the porch one morning as she stood at the edge of the cabin, one baby tucked against her shoulder, the other still in the cradle. She didn't go far, didn't need to, but her feet were in the dirt again, and that was something. I didn't speak to her still, not more than a few words when needed. Just offered food when it was hot, brought water without asking. When the girls cried, I handed her what she needed and stepped away. That seemed to earn me more than any questions ever could. One morning, I found her humming. Soft. Barely there. But real. She was wrapping the girls in fresh cloth I'd picked up from town the day before. She didn't know I was behind her, and I didn't interrupt. Just stood there listening like it was a hymn I'd waited my whole life to hear. I slept better that night. Not long, but deep. The kind of sleep that comes when the world feels less like something out to kill you and more like something that might let you live. She didn't ask to stay, and I didn't ask her to go. We just kept going. Day by day, step by step. I mended fences. She mended wounds. I boiled water. She stitched cloth. I hunted. She rocked the girls until they slept with their hands curled like blossoms. We didn't say what we were building. Didn't have to. Some things don't need names to be true. There are two kinds of quiet in this world. The first is peaceful earned. The hush of a full belly, the crackle of fire, the soft weight of sleep settling over a safe room. It wraps around you like a wool blanket. Makes you forget what you used to be afraid of. The second kind, it's sharper. Tighter. It presses against your skin like ice under your collar. You don't hear it as much as feel it. A silence that means something is watching, something is missing, or something is coming. On the 7th morning, I felt the second kind. It was subtle at first. The birds didn't come back to the pine at dawn like they usually did. The wind had a different flavor, cold but metallic, like rain that never fell. And the mare stirred in the shed twice before I even stepped outside, hooves scraping the earth like she was trying to remember how to run. I didn't say a word about it. Didn't want to wake worry in a place that had only just remembered how to breathe. Instead, I sharpened the axe, fixed the west hinge on the door, checked my traps early. That's when I found it. Not far, just beyond the ridge, where the snow melted slower. A print, a single boot pressed deep into slush and dirt. Too wide to be mine, too fresh to be old, not made by someone hunting either. This boot wasn't careful. It wasn't testing its step. It was searching, looking. I crouched low, gloved fingers brushing the edge of the impression. The heel was narrow. Military, maybe. Rancher if he cared about polish. Too clean for a drifter, and too close. I stood slowly. Scanned the tree line. Nothing moved, but the kind of nothing that was trying too hard. I didn't follow it. Not yet. Didn't want to lead whatever made it back to the cabin by accident. That's how you lose more than your firewood. Instead, I backtracked, took a wide loop through the trees, left no trail of my own. When I returned, she was outside, arms wrapped tight against the wind. One of the girls was on her hip, asleep against her collar. She looked up at me like she already knew. I nodded toward the door. We went in without a word. That night, I reinforced the shutters, sharpened the knives, loaded the rifle slow, piece by piece, so each click echoed loud in the quiet room. She watched from the cradle side. Her shoulders stiffened slightly with every sound, but she didn't speak, didn't flinch. Her silence was different now. Not fear. Readiness. Like a coiled thread inside her had finally remembered how to hold tension. He didn't sleep. Took the chair near the stove and watched the window. The fire cast long shadows across the cabin walls. I counted their breaths again and again. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hers steadier now. The twins, tiny but persistent. By dawn, nothing had happened, but the world outside felt thinner. Frayed at the edges, like something was trying to push through. I saddled the mare after breakfast. Left before the sun rose above the trees. This time, I followed the prints. Not all the way. Just enough to learn. He wasn't alone. Another set joined his after the ridge. Heavier. Dragged the heel. Didn't lift his feet much. I pictured them as I walked 2 men, maybe 3. The kind that leave rust behind when they breathe. Not soldiers. Not farmers. Something hungrier. They hadn't found the cabin. Yet. But they were circling. I turned back before noon. When I returned, she was feeding the girls. Didn't look at me right away. I set the rifle down, stripped off the coat, hung it by the fire. The smell of smoke and boiled oats lingered in the air. Something comforting, if only on the surface. I sat, cleaned the barrel, polished the sight, checked the doorframe for weakness. Later, she touched my arm as I passed. Light. Just once. I stopped. She looked at me, eyes steady. Not a question, a statement. She knew. Something had shifted in her since I found her. Something that didn't bend anymore, and I saw it then clearly. She wasn't waiting to be saved. Not anymore. She was choosing to live. And that meant fighting if she had to. That night, I moved the cradle farther from the window. Made 2 extra trips for firewood. Not because we needed it, but because I needed the excuse to keep my hands busy. There were 3 prints the next day. I found them by the stream. Boots. Spurs on one. One print deeper than the rest heavier. Probably the one giving orders. They hadn't found the well, but they were getting close. Too close. They were walking like they knew what they were looking for. Not game. Not shelter. Someone. Someone exactly like her. I didn't tell her. Not yet. But that night, I opened the floorboard beneath the bed. Took out the revolver I hadn't touched in 5 years. She saw it. Said nothing. Just tightened the girls' blankets and rocked them slower. The next morning, she braided her hair, pulled it back tight, tucked in the loose ends. It looked like armor. And maybe it was. By then, the prints were closer. Within earshot if they shouted. I laid wire near the trail. Low. Just enough to trip a horse or twist an ankle. Nothing lethal, not yet. I made sure the girls stayed inside. Taught her how to bar the door from the inside with the rifle stock. Where to hide if the front collapsed. How to use the revolver if I didn't come back. She didn't cry. Didn't panic. Just listened. Learned. Like someone who'd already made her choice. The mare snorted twice that evening. Didn't sleep. I kept my boots on. Hat low, rifle on the table. And at midnight, a noise, far off. Like wood breaking under weight. Then footsteps. Slow. Measured. They passed the cabin. Didn't stop. But they were close enough to smell the fire. He didn't move. Didn't breathe. Waited until they were gone. Then waited longer. An hour passed before she exhaled. Another before I blinked. And somewhere between the fire dying and the dawn rising, I realized something. We weren't just healing anymore. We were preparing. For a storm. For blood. For justice. Or revenge. Whatever name it went by. It was the first time I'd seen them. Not their tracks. Not shadows from a tree line. Them. They came at high noon. Like cowards, pretending to be brave. The kind of men who want to be seen. But only when they've already convinced themselves they can't be hurt. 3 of them, just like I'd pictured. Dust-covered coats, long enough to sweep their own sins behind them. The tall one wore a red scarf around his neck, too clean for a traveler. The second had a limp. Old injury, maybe. Or fresh, either way, it made him drag his left foot just slightly in the snow. The third one didn't belong to anything human. No scars, no color in his face, no movement unless he meant to kill something. They stopped just short of the fence. Didn't call out. Didn't knocks. They just stood there, staring at the cabin like they could smell the memory of someone they'd lost. Or someone they hadn't finished breaking. I didn't greet them. Just opened the door enough to step outside, rifle in hand, but down at my side. I didn't have to raise it. Not yet. The barrel alone was message enough. The tall one smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. He looked past me toward the window. I stood in the way. The limper coughed into his glove. Red showed in the cloth. Maybe from the cold, Maybe not. The third one just watched. He didn't blink much. Didn't breathe much either. They knew what they were looking for. They just didn't know yet that they'd already made their last mistake. I kept my boots planted in the snow, didn't shift, didn't speak, just stared back. The tall one stepped forward once. That was enough. I raised the rifle, not threatening, not sudden, just enough to let the wind carry the click of readiness. His feet stopped like they remembered a lesson from a lifetime ago. He said something. I saw it in the twitch of his lips. But I don't read mouths, and I don't trade words with men like that. Instead, I tilted my head slightly toward the trail they'd come from. Go. Hesitated. The limp shifted behind him, nervous. The third one, though his eyes didn't move from the cabin door, like he could see through wood, like he knew exactly what was inside. Her, them, what he'd come for. He didn't let my breath change. Didn't show fear. Didn't show rage. Just certainty. After a long minute, they turned. Not quick. Not slow. Calculated. The third one was last to go. He looked over his shoulder once, eyes locking with mine. No threat in his stare. Just promise. Then they disappeared over the ridge. I didn't go inside right away. Waited. Counted backward from 50. Watched the trees until they swallowed the last shadow. Then I stepped back into the warmth. She was standing, cradle behind her, the girls wrapped in both arms like she knew they might never sleep in peace again. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. She had seen the way I stood on the porch, had felt the change in the air. Her shoulders were high, but not panicked. I could see the calculation behind her eyes now too. Not escape, not collapse. Defense. We moved through the cabin like soldiers, each knowing what the other needed before asking. She poured hot water. I packed ammunition. She fed the girls. I boarded the outer wall facing the ridge. She gathered cloth. I lit the lanterns and trimmed the wicks for blackout. And when the night fell, we sat in silence. Two ghosts waiting for a second death. She traced her fingers over the edge of the revolver once, then pushed it closer to me. I shook my head, pushed it back. She kept it beside her after that. Not like a threat, like a vow. I slept for an hour. She didn't. And when I woke just before dawn, she was still sitting, still watching, eyes rimmed with sleepless fire. Outside, the snow was crusted hard, wind carving little knives through the trees. No tracks. Not yet. But they'd be back. Men like that don't ask twice. They take. Unless someone's willing to bury the question first. I hunted that day, but not far. Stayed close to the cabin's edge. Shot a deer that didn't run. Nature knew too, somehow that silence had turned into something sharper. We salted the meat. Packed it in cloth. Prepared for the possibility that the next meal might be inside a barricade. That night, I reinforced the chimney, covered the shutters fully, hid the cradle in the root cellar just in case. We slept in shifts. Her first, then me. No fire, no smoke, no sound but breathing and waiting. By morning, the birds were gone again. The mare in the shed whinnied softly, ears up, nervous. The world was holding its breath. And that's when I knew they'd found something. A clue. A scent, or maybe just enough time to become desperate again. They would return soon. Not to ask, not to threaten, to take. The third morning came without snow, but it brought something else. A sound soft, sharp, a note in the wind that didn't belong, like a match being struck in a church. It wasn't loud, didn't have to be. It carried the same way a scream does when everything around it refuses to listen. I was outside, splitting logs. She opened the cabin door without a word. Stood there with the girls tucked tight against her. Her hair was tied up again tighter than before, like a rope pulled through teeth. She didn't look at me. Didn't have to. I knew then. She was leaving. I don't know how she came to the decision, whether it had settled inside her during one of the sleepless nights, or bloomed suddenly the moment she saw her reflection in the basin. But I knew the shape of that kind of choice. It doesn't come with anger, not with fear, just clarity. Like a road being lit by lightning, I set the axe down slowly, walked toward the cabin. Inside, her things were packed. A torn shawl, a small cloth pouch, a broken spoon tucked beside a faded photo I hadn't seen before. Not of the girls, not of me. A man, smiling, but not for long. He didn't ask. She wouldn't have answered. Some stories are etched too deep to be told aloud. You feel them in how a person carries their silence. Heavy in some spots, hollow in others. She handed me one of the girls, the smaller one. She didn't cry, just blinked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. And maybe she was. Because I wasn't who I'd been 5 days ago. Or 5 years ago. I was something else now. Someone else. The kind of man who follows. Not because he's curious, but because he owes the silence that saved him. We left just before dusk. Didn't take the trail. Didn't ride the horse. Just walked slow, steady, through the shallow valley behind the creek. Away from the prince. Away from the past, but not far enough to outrun it. Not yet. The forest closed in behind us like a closing door. Pines stood tall on both sides, arms like spears in the cold. She led. I followed. The girls slept, rocked against our chests in slings we'd made from torn curtain. We didn't speak. Didn't need to. That night, we made camp beneath a half-broken outcrop, its belly just wide enough to hold us if we didn't breathe too deep. I kept watch. She slept, one eye open. The next day, we moved again. East this time. She knew the route. Or remembered it. Some muscle memory behind her steps. A map that had nothing to do with paper. And sometime around midday, I saw it. The town. Or what was left of it. A few burnt-out frames. An old well with a rope that looked like it had last touched water in another century. A saloon missing its teeth, shutters hanging sideways, swinging like ghosts in wind. She stopped at the edge, looked at it like someone might look at a grave they thought they'd never see again. And then she stepped forward, into the wreckage. I didn't stop her, didn't ask why, but I watched her back closely. The way her shoulders tensed, then dropped. As if she'd expected to find something here. Someone, but nothing remained. Just rot and ash and memories that stuck to the soles of her boots. She knelt near the well, ran her fingers over the wood, traced something beneath the grime letters, maybe, or initials. Then she stood and walked straight into the old saloon. I followed, rifle in hand. Inside, it smelled like mildew and loss. But she moved with purpose, stepped behind the bar, kicked aside broken crates. And then, beneath the floorboards, a box. Small, heavy, metal edges. She pried it loose with a rusted hinge from the wall, set it on the counter, opened it. Inside were papers, worn, folded, sealed in cloth, and a small revolver, newer than anything else in the town. She looked at the gun for a long time. Then she handed it to me. Like a passing of fire, I opened the paper. Not a map. A list. Names. 10 of them. All scratched out except 3. The last one, burned through. Unreadable. She didn't flinch. Didn't explain. She just took the list back, folded it, and tucked it beneath her coat. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just running, wasn't just surviving. It was finishing something. A war long begun. One she hadn't started, but one she refused to end quietly. We stayed in the ruins that night. Set no fire. Laid the girls in a cradle of old blankets and dried moss. And while they slept, she sat at the window, staring at the dark, her fingers resting on the edge of the revolver like she was waiting for something. Or someone. When I woke at first light, she was still there, still waiting, eyes clear, posture still, and on the edge of the horizon, smoke. Not rising from the old town. Not from us. From somewhere else. Closer. They were coming. But she was no longer hiding. She had made her stand. Now I had to decide if I would make mine beside her. But the answer had already taken root in my boots. I wasn't walking away. Not now. Not from her. Not from the girls. Not from the fire I'd seen behind her eyes the day she handed me the list. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was hunting. The land didn't change much as we walked. But I did. We moved in silence, always eastward. Sometimes across jagged cliffs, sometimes through dry brush where nothing had lived for years, but never on the open road. She avoided those like graves. Her pace never slowed, not even when the baby cried, or when the cold sank in deeper than the bones. I stopped trying to lead. That wasn't my place anymore. I followed. It was the third day out from the ruins when I first saw what she'd become. We came across a ranch, burned to the ground. Not recently. You could tell from the way the weeds had grown over the ash, from the rust on the kettle half buried in soot. Whoever had lived there, if they'd lived at all, hadn't been back in a long time. But she walked right up to the blackened porch like she knew every step of it. She didn't speak, just knelt, placed the girls down gently on a blanket, then moved toward a half-standing wall near the fireplace. I saw her pull something out from the broken brick, a small box wooden, wrapped in cloth so rotted it turned to dust in her hands. Inside, another slip of paper, another name. She stared at it for a long time, then folded it once, tucked it into the lining of her coat. There was a story in that place. One I wasn't meant to hear, but one I could feel. The porch still smelled of kerosene. There were old boot prints in the soot, small enough to belong to a child. He didn't ask. She wouldn't have answered. We moved on before sunset. That night, we found shelter in a cave just off the base of a ravine. The wind howled like something trying to get back in. I kept watch while the girls slept. She sat near them, eyes closed, but not resting. She hadn't truly slept in days. Not since the cabin. Not since she saw the men again. But I understood now. This was never about fear. It was about completion. The next day, we came across the tracks again. Hoof prints. 3 sets. Heavy. Fresh. They'd passed that way maybe hours ahead of us, but not far. I could feel them now, not just behind us, but beside us. Encircling. I tightened my grip on the rifle. Not out of panic. Just readiness. The mare was gone, left her behind at the saloon ruins. Couldn't risk the noise. Couldn't risk being seen. Every step we took now was earned in sweat and silence. The girls were quiet. Like they knew too. Even the forest had fallen silent. By midday, we reached a canyon pass, deep, narrow, like a scar across the land. The wind came through in long whistles, like someone breathing just behind your ear. She stopped, looked down into the gorge. There, on the other side, a shack, small, leaning, half swallowed by the rocks. She motioned. I didn't question. We crossed, climbed, moved through brush that felt more like teeth than branches. The shack door was off its hinges. Inside, nothing but dust and one broken chair. But in the floor beneath a loose board was a tin case. And inside that, a photograph. 4 men, younger, smiling, but not happy. Not really. The woman stared at the photo for so long, I thought maybe time had stopped for her. Her fingers trembled slightly, just once. Then the tremor was gone. She folded the photo, burned it in a rusted pot with oil we'd found under the bed frame. Let the flame go high for a moment. Didn't even flinch. Then we moved again. That night, we didn't stop. She didn't speak, but her pace quickened. The list, the names, the memories, they were pulling her now like gravity. And I knew then, she wasn't just walking toward revenge. She was walking home, to the beginning, to the place where whatever happened started. I followed, because there was no other place I belonged. It was the 6th night when they found us again. Not all 3, just one. The limping one. He was waiting beside the river bend, crouched low, thinking he couldn't be seen. He was wrong. I saw him before she did. But she was faster. I raised my rifle, but she had her revolver out first. She didn't fire. She didn't speak. Just stood there, girls behind her, her breath curling from her mouth like smoke from a hot wound. The man rose slowly. He didn't reach for his weapon, didn't move at all, just stared, and then, without a sound, dropped to his knees. She walked forward. I followed. She didn't aim, didn't threaten, just looked at him, and I watched something pass between them. A knowing, maybe guilt, maybe shame, maybe nothing. She pulled out the folded paper from her coat, unfolded it, crossed a name, then she turned, left him keeling. He never looked back. Neither did she. By the next day, we reached the edge of the valley, and there it was. A town, small, one street. No church, no mayor's house, just a row of broken saloons, a jail, a post office missing its windows. And at the far end, a house, untouched, 2 stories, pale wood, white door, freshly painted shutters, and a red scarf hanging from the fence post. They were there, waiting. She didn't stop to think, just walked. Girls in one arm, revolver in the other. And I followed, because that's what I'd do until the end. Whatever that looked like. I can't tell you the name of that town because I don't think it had one. The sign above the sheriff's office had rotted clean off, and the letters on the general store's window had long since peeled away. But the dust that clung to the windows, the dried blood that crusted near the well out front, the silence that held the air like a noose, they all told me exactly what kind of place this was. And it was waiting for her. She didn't pause at the edge of town, didn't flinch when the wind kicked up sand hard enough to sting the skin. She walked like a ghost returning to the place where she'd died. And I followed, rifle gripped tight, every step an echo of hers. The twins were silent in her arms. I knew they didn't understand. But I also knew they felt it, the weight of the place, the tension in the sky. Even the birds didn't cry overhead. There was no one in the street, but they were there, behind the curtains, behind the boarded-up windows, watching, waiting. She walked right up the main road like it belonged to her, and maybe it did. We passed the saloon first. It leaned slightly to the right. Half of its balcony collapsed into the street. The batwing doors hung on by one hinge. A bottle rolled lazily in the breeze along the floor inside. I caught a shadow move on the second floor. Didn't say a word, just nodded. She already knew. The house at the end of the street was where she stopped. Fresh paint, unbroken windows. A lie in a town full of rot. She turned to me. First time in hours. Her voice came out low, rough. Stay here. She didn't wait for a response. Just handed me the girls and walked up the porch steps. She didn't knock. Didn't announce herself. Just opened the door and went in. I waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. Then I heard the first shot. Not hers. A man's. Then another. Then the window exploded outward, and she came flying through it in a storm of glass and fury. She hit the dirt hard but rolled, came up with her revolver already raised, already firing. 2 men followed. Not the ones from before, these were younger. Hired guns. But they weren't fast enough. The first took a round to the throat. Dropped without a sound. The second reached for his belt, but she was already on him, blade out, straight across his gut. He screamed. Then nothing. Blood ran down the wood of the porch and soaked into the sand like it had been thirsty. I handed the girls to the old barrel behind the post office and whispered prayers I didn't believe in. Then I followed. The front door was still open, swinging gently in the breeze. I stepped over one of the bodies and into the house. It was clean, too clean. The kind of clean you don't get from living in a place, but from scrubbing something away. The floors were polished, the chairs perfectly in line, A half-finished meal sat untouched on the table. She was already at the top of the stairs, gun in one hand, knife in the other. And then we heard him, from behind the study door, a laugh. Slow, dry, familiar. Took you long enough, girl. She didn't hesitate. Kicked the door clean off its hinges. Inside, a man in a dark vest, gray hair slicked back, gold tooth glinting in the lamplight. And he wasn't alone. Another man stood by the window, tall, wide, with a scar down his jawline. The last two names on her list. What happened next? It wasn't a shootout. It wasn't war. It was memory, turned violent. She moved like she'd been practicing for years. Straight for the man by the window. He raised a shotgun too slow. She drove the blade into his side so hard the hilt cracked his ribs. He went down screaming. She didn't look back. The one with the gold tooth raised his hands. Now hold on. We don't gotta do this. She didn't answer. Just raised her revolver. You don't even know the full story, he stammered. You were just a girl. You don't remember. Bang. The bullet hit his shoulder. He fell back against the desk. You think killing us brings it back? He groaned. The baby? The fire? You think you're some kind of justice? Another shot. His leg this time, he screamed. She begged me to spare you. Your mama. Did she never tell you that? That you were supposed to die in that fire? She stood over him, breathing heavy, face blank. I did die, she said. Everything after that's just been vengeance walking. Then she pulled the trigger one last time. The sound echoed through the whole town like thunder. Then silence. We didn't stay. Didn't search the rest of the house. She took a scrap of paper from the man's pocket, added it to the others, then she burned the house. Watched it fall into ash. Didn't blink. We found the twins where I left them. Still breathing, still warm. And we walked. Not away from something this time, but towards something. I wasn't sure what yet. But the land felt different now. Like the earth had trembled and finally settled. We made camp that night on the hill above the town. You could still see the smoke rising. She didn't say a word. Just watched. And I watched her. Not the same woman I found by the roadside. Not a victim anymore. Not even a survivor. She was something else entirely. The kind of thing you only become when every piece of your past has been burned to the ground. She took out the list that night. Only one name left. And I saw it. Just once. Before she folded it again and tucked it into her boot. It wasn't one of the men. It wasn't a stranger. It was a woman's name. Handwritten in the same scratchy ink. And under it, a town. A church. A confession. She looked at me then. Just once. Tomorrow, we ride. We rode at dawn. The sun cracked the sky like an old egg, spilling orange blood across the horizon. The twins nestled safely in their mother's lap, swaddled and quiet as the desert woke beneath us. She hadn't spoken since the fire consumed that rotten town. Not a word. Just rode with the weight of the list burning inside her. I tried to catch her eye once or twice, but she was always staring past the landscape, past me, as if searching for something no one else could see. The road was long and empty, dust and silence our only companions. And then we came to it. A church. The building sat on a small hill like a scar on the land. Whitewashed walls chipped and peeling, a steeple crooked and leaning like it was about to fall. But what caught my eye was the cross. Blackened, burnt, hanging at an awkward angle above the heavy wooden door. I could feel it before I saw it, the weight in the air, the heavy breath of secrets and sins. She dismounted quietly, holding the twins close. No hesitation this time. She pulled the door open. Inside, the church was darker than the desert night. The pews were cracked and dry. Dust covered every surface, like a blanket of forgotten memories. A single candle flickered weakly on the altar, and there, sitting in the front row, was a woman. Old, wrinkled, her eyes sharp and cold like chips of flint. She didn't stand. She didn't flinch. She just watched. And when our eyes met, I saw something I wasn't ready for. Recognition. Guilt. Fear. "You came," she said. Her voice was low, cracked, but steady. "I told you I would. I thought you were dead. So did I." They were both true. For years, she'd believed it. For years, she'd hoped. And for years, the past had clawed its way through her bones like a beast starving for revenge. We sat down in the dusty pews, the twins still sleeping in her arms. The woman's eyes never left us. "Why are you here?" she asked finally. "To finish what was started," came the answer. "And what is that?" She laughed, but it was bitter, like a poison bitter on the tongue. "You don't remember, do you?" "I remember enough." The woman's hands trembled. "I did what I had to do. You burned the house. To hide the truth. The fire that took my family." The silence was heavy. I thought, if I destroyed everything, the pain would disappear. But it didn't. Her voice cracked, and for the first time I saw tears slip down her weathered cheeks. "Your mother, she was my sister." The weight of that sentence fell between us like a thunderclap. "She was trying to protect you from him." The woman nodded toward the dark corner of the church, where a shadow seemed to shift. "The man who did those terrible things, your father." That word father hung in the air like a curse. She swallowed hard. "He was a monster, and I was weak. I couldn't stop him, but I tried. I hid you. I saved you. But the rest, I couldn't save." She looked at the twins, their tiny faces peaceful in the flickering candlelight. "This is why I called you here, to forgive." To heal. I watched her eyes, saw the storm raging beneath the surface. She wasn't ready. Not yet. But this was the reckoning. The moment when the past either destroys you or sets you free. I don't forgive easily, but I understand. Because I am you, and you are me. Her lips twitched in a sad smile. "The blood of survivors runs through your veins. And tomorrow we end this." The woman stood up slowly. "There is one thing you must know. He's coming, and he won't stop until everything is ashes." The final battle was looming, the storm gathering on the horizon. And in the quiet between us, I could feel it, the tremble of earth before the lightning strikes. She rose with the weight of 1,000 regrets. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, ve feet." Outside, the desert was calm. But inside me, something was breaking. The past had found us. And it wasn't done yet. The night wrapped around us like a shroud. The desert wind whispered secrets through the cracked windows of the old church. Inside, the air was thick with dread and anticipation. The candle's flame flickered, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts along the peeling walls. I sat across from her, the woman who held the key to the past I had tried so hard to bury. Her eyes, once cold and distant, now glistened with a fragile hope. The twins, bundled in soft blankets, slept peacefully between us, oblivious to the storm gathering outside. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "he comes." Her voice trembled just enough to betray the calm she tried to wear like armor. "Your father." The words hit me like a slap. It was one thing to hear them in whispers, in rumors, in nightmares. It was another to face the truth, raw and undeniable. The man who had haunted my childhood, the shadow lurking behind every broken memory, was real, and he was coming for us. I clenched my fists, trying to shove down the anger bubbling inside. But it wasn't just anger. It was fear, not for me, but for her. For the woman who carried my blood in her veins. For the twins who knew nothing of the darkness that awaited. "We need a plan," I said, voice low but steady. "We can't just wait for him to find us." She nodded slowly. "I've prepared. There are traps around the church. I've hidden weapons. But he has men, and they will come." Her words were a cold promise. The night stretched on. We went over every detail. Every possible way he could strike. Every weakness we could exploit. But the truth was clear. We were outnumbered, outgunned, outmatched. As the first light bled through the cracked windows, we heard it. The thundering hoofbeats. The rumble of horses like a freight train barreling toward the church. I looked at her. This is it. She cradled the twins, eyes blazing with fierce determination. For them, we fight. The door burst open with a crash. Dust swirled in the sudden wind. Men poured in, faces hard and cruel. And behind them, taller than any of the rest, he stood. The man whose name was whispered with fear. The monster of my nightmares. My father, his eyes scanned the room, cold and calculating. You can't hide forever, he said. It's time to end this. I stepped forward, fists clenched. We're not afraid of you. His laugh was harsh, echoing off the cracked walls. You should be. The fight began. Gunshots shattered the silence. Wood splintered under the force of fists and feet, the air filled with smoke and screams. I fought like a man possessed, fueled by years of pain and rage. She fought beside me, fierce and unyielding, protecting the twins with every breath. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the men fell. But sol did we. In the chaos, I saw him. My father, standing over her, raising his hand. Time slowed. I screamed, pulled a gun. The shot echoed like thunder. Exaggerate. She collapsed, blood blooming on her shirt. The twins cried out, waking from their sleep. I grabbed them, holding them tight. No more. This ends now. My father looked at me, eyes burning with hate. You send Vin. You're just like me, weak. But I was done listening. I was done running. I raised my gun again and fired. The dust settled. The silence was deafening. She was alive, but barely. The twins asleep, safe for now. My father lay motionless. We had won, but at what cost? The church stood battered, our bodies bruised, our hearts heavy. She looked at me, tears streaking the dirt on her face. Thank you for everything. I held her hand. We're still alive. That's what matters. Outside, the sun rose high. A new day. A chance to heal. But the scars remained. The past was never truly gone. It lived in the ashes. The morning sun pierced through the cracked windows of the battered church, casting harsh beams onto the splintered wooden floor. Dust danced in the light, swirling around the heavy silence that now hung between us. The gunshots, the screams, the violence, they all felt like echoes from another lifetime, a life we had just barely escaped. She lay there, pale and trembling, but alive. The twins slept in her arms, their small faces peaceful despite the chaos that had torn through the night. I kept my eyes on my father's still form, the man who had haunted every corner of my past, now reduced to nothing but broken bones and bitter memories. The weight of it all pressed down on me, relief, exhaustion, sorrow, rage, all tangled into one unbearable knot in my chest. I moved closer to her, brushing the blood-stained strands of hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered open, the hazel irises meeting mine, fragile but fierce. She gave a faint, grateful smile, one that spoke of trust and survival. We're still here, I said, voice rough from shouting, from the fight, from everything we had endured. She nodded weakly. Because of you. No, I corrected gently. Because of us. Together. Outside, the wind had stilled. The desert was calm once more, indifferent to our pain, our losses, our victories. But inside, something had shifted, something that neither time nor blood could erase. I sat back. The twins nestled against her chest, and felt the weight of what came next. We had won the battle, but the war, our war, was far from over. The past could no longer claim us. It had burned to ashes. But from those ashes, we had to build something new, something stronger. Days passed in a haze. She recovered slowly, each breath a reminder of what had almost been lost. The twins grew, fragile yet resilient, their innocent laughter a balm for my battered soul. I kept watch over them, over her, over the fragile peace we had carved out in this forsaken place. But the desert silence was deceptive. News traveled fast in these parts. The men who had followed my father were scattered but not broken. Some hid in the shadows, licking their wounds, waiting for a chance to reclaim what they thought was theirs. I knew it was only a matter of time before the fight resumed. Yet, I was different now. I wasn't the scared boy who had fled from his father's wrath. I was a man forged in fire, tempered by loss and love. I had something worth fighting for, something worth dying for. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, she and I sat outside the church, watching the sky burn orange and red. The twins played nearby, their laughter echoing like a promise. She reached for my hand, her fingers warm and sure. "We can't stay here forever," she said softly. "This place, it's a cage." I nodded, knowing she was right. We had to move on, to find a new life away from the ghosts of the past. "But we'll go together," I said, squeezing her hand. "Wherever that is." She smiled, hope shining bright despite everything we had been through, together. The night before we left, I stood alone outside the church, staring into the vastness of the desert. The stars stretched endlessly above me, cold and distant. I thought of my father, the monster, the man, the shadow who had shaped so much of my life. I thought of the man I was now, standing on the edge of something unknown but full of possibility. I whispered into the darkness, not knowing if the wind would carry my words. "I'm done running. I'm done hiding. I'm ready." We left at dawn, the church fading behind us like a broken memory. The road ahead was uncertain, winding through deserts and towns that held no promises. But as long as we walked it together, I knew we could face whatever came next. The twins' laughter was a song in my ears, their small hands gripping ours tightly. The woman I loved walked beside me, her strength and courage a beacon through the darkest nights. And I, once a lost boy, was finally free. Freedom was not the absence of fear. Freedom was standing tall despite it. Freedom was choosing love over hate, hope over despair. Freedom was the fire that burned within us, even when the world tried to snuff it out. As the sun rose higher, warming the earth beneath our feet, I looked at my family, the future we had fought so hard to claim. The road stretched ahead, long and uncertain, but we faced it without looking back. Because sometimes, the only way to heal the past is to walk forward into the unknown. Together, and for the first time in a long time, I believed in tomorrow. The desert had tried to break us, but from its ashes, we had risen. Stronger, unbroken, free. If you were in the main character's shoes, would you have fought the same battle? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video, and be sure to explore the other videos on the screen for more gripping stories.